All right, all right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, and students. Thank you for joining us today. It is our favorite show. Rachel and I love doing this show, one, because we are food buffs. And who doesn't like good food, right? So we're excited to have you today. Today's show is live from the Chef's Apprentice, but we have a special guest, a special treat for you all today. I am going to turn it over to my co-host. But before I do that, I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you all for joining us today. Today's episode is being recorded. So if anybody would like the recording afterwards, please feel free to either email myself. I will drop my email in the chat, as well as Chef Tom. We will make sure that you get the recording. So again, I will now turn it over to my co-host, Miss Rachel Flegel, who is a student on her way out. She's going to be graduating, but this is the shows that she absolutely loved the most, and she requests to do it all the time. So she's going to share some exciting news about today's presentation.
All right, thank you so much, Cindy, and thank you just everyone for coming today to be a part of the cooking show. We're so glad to have you here, and like Cindy said, this is definitely my favorite event that I get to help out with. I just wanted to share that with Chef Tom and Chef Steve today, we have a special guest, Hack's own pastry art instructor, Chef Casey. Thank you for joining us, Chef Casey. She also owns and operates Racing the Bar at Broad Street Market. And this month happens to be Women's History Month, so having Chef Casey here is a great reminder of just the many strides women have made in numerous career fields, from the culinary arts to the corporate world and beyond. And we just like to take a moment to celebrate their many accomplishments. So thank you again, Chef Casey, Chef Tom, and Chef Steve, and we will turn it over to you.
Top of the morning to you, everybody. I bet you don't know what we're going to be talking about today. Well, you know, Wednesday is St. Patrick's Day. So we're going to be discussing Irish food. So behind me, you can see Chef Steve, and off to my right is Chef Casey Callahan. Could we get a better last name for today's presentation? Chef Casey is one of our pastry arts instructors. She's awesome. And you're going to see two great recipes from her. So first what's the meal that everybody thinks about when it's St. Patrick's Day? Chef Steve, what do you think about? Corned beef and cabbage. So just a little bit of history about corned beef and cabbage. It's actually more of an Irish American meal than it is an Irish meal. So the Irish did corned beef. And why is it called corned beef? Well, actually it's because of the large, like rock salt crystals that they used in the curing process. They called corns. So that's why it came corned beef. And a lot of times they didn't do it for themselves. They did it for the English, and they would use briskets. So you can also use a round. If you go in the grocery store nowadays, you'll actually see 3 different cuts of corned beef. We're going to show you 2 of them today. But the corning process is usually made with a curing mixture. So back here is a home curing mixture called Tender Quick. It's actually mixtures of salt and nitrates, sodium nitrates. And the nitrates is what keeps the corned beef from turning gray. It actually helps keep it the pink color. And there's a lot of stuff on the market and in the internet about nitrates, whether you use them or you don't. It's used in bacon. It helps keep bacon its color. So it is part of our world. It's part of the home cured meats and factory cured meats. And the other things that is in corned beef is pickling spice. So I wanted to show you real quick kind of some of the ingredients. We have them all up here across the top in the whole version. Allspice, crushed red pepper, whole black pepper, bay leaves, whole cloves, coriander, mustard seeds, and cinnamon stick. You can also buy it already mixed up ahead of time, and you'll see it. It's called pickling spice. But these are actually the ingredients that are in it. And if you want to make your own, if you want to be a little creative, you can make your own. You can do it in a coffee bean grinder. You could do it that way. If you don't have one of those, this is an easy way to do it. Just kind of put it on a cutting board. Put all the ingredients on a cutting board. Now the bay leaf we're going to kind of crush up by hand. just like that.
Chef Tom, we have a question. Someone said nitrates give me a migraine. Can I use something else? I have to buy uncured bacon.
You would have to buy uncured bacon. I don't know if they sell bacon that doesn't have nitrates in it. They might, because other people have those issues also. So, but once you have your pickling spice put together, you can use a rolling pin in a bag, or you can use the bottom of a skillet. And then basically what you're going to do is kind of crush everything up, just like that. Make it smaller. It opens up all the spices. You can, if you want to, kind of heat that up in your skillet to kind of bring out some of the oils. And what I'm going to do is put these in a coffee filter. This is just a regular coffee filter that you have for your coffee machines if you don't have a Keurig. And we're going to make a sachet. So a sachet allows you to put the spices in your broth mixture, or however you want to do it, and that they don't get into the broth. And you're able to just float that right in there, and I'm going to show you what it looks like. Okay, Chef? Now what I would do with this after I was done is tie it onto the handle of my brisket pot. So, real quick, that's how you do pickling spice. Two different kinds of what I bought for our presentation today. These are at the Weiss store. This is called a point cut, and then there's a flat cut. Okay, so briskets actually have two different muscles. The other one that's available is a round, and it actually comes off the bottom round. It's a little more expensive. It's actually a lot more expensive. So the flat cut is exactly what it looks like. And if you ever saw a brisket, it has one muscle that goes this way and another muscle that kind of goes this way. And if you separate them, which is what they did, it allows, and it's really a matter of preference of what you like. So for today's presentation, Chef Steve, if I can have, I did two different cooking methods of corned beef. This is the point cut. And what I did is what I did with this is I cooked it in stock. So as you can see, this is my sachet. All right, that's in there. All the flavors in there, but not all the crunchy spices, because I don't want them in there. I actually want to save my stock for another purpose. So we're going to put that back here.
Chef Tom, how long do you cook the corned beef?
So if you go by the directions on the package, it says 50 minutes, but I'm going to tell you that's not long enough. The best way to tell is because everything varies. Oven temperatures are not the same in everybody's house. Is this. It's called fork tender. So if I put a fork in there and it doesn't pull back, it's ready. Okay. If I would put a fork in there and I'd have to shake that piece of meat off of there, it's not going to be tender. That's the same theory for pot roast, anything like that that you braise. So, okay. So I actually had this on for simmering for probably a couple hours. All right. And it kind of gets the aromatics through your house. This is another version of cooking corned beef. And this is actually the one I'm going to plate up. This is the flat. Okay. So the flat is actually, it means what it says. It's a little longer. And then what I did with this, because Chef Casey was here and we were collaborating about, because her husband is Irish, we were collaborating about some techniques, and I liked her suggestion. So we did at the very end, for like the last 30 minutes, I uncovered it because everything was ready to go. And I made a mixture of whole grain mustard and brown sugar. And I painted the top of it. So to do our presentation, so I started off, just to give you an idea, I started off with just the flat and water, a little bit of water, because anytime you braise, you need liquid. in a pan covered. Okay. Then I added my vegetables, but not my cabbage. And it was towards the last half hour. I put my cabbage in, and when I cut my cabbage, the idea is to keep some of the core in so you can pick up the wedge and bring it right out. Okay.
And Chef Tom, we had two other questions. Someone asked, can the beef be cooked in a crock pot, and what kind of stock should you use?
You can cook corned beef in a crock pot. In fact, a lot of people do. It's because it's slow cooked. Crock pots are great for that. So we have some of our, yep. And your stock, I wouldn't add any stock. I would add some just water. If you add, because the corning process with corned beef is a lot of sodium. So you don't need any other sodium. It's going to make its own broth. Okay. So we have here our wedge of cabbage, our traditional vegetables. And I'm just going to slice a little bit of corned beef to go right on top of that. Oh, that looks good.
Chef Tom, we had another question. Someone wondered if you used stock in the other recipe?
No, I did not. Same one. I just put in regular hot water, cold water, and just because it makes its own stock.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And then one of the things I like to do is put a little bit of the broth into here. It helps keep it moist. And then you would normally serve this with Irish soda bread. So that's a presentation of kind of an oven method. You can see the difference in the color with how it works for the boiled method. All right. So I'm going to turn over our next demonstration to Chef Casey Callahan.
Hi, how's everyone today? My name is Casey Callahan. I am a pastry arts instructor here at HAC. I get the pleasure of working with Chef Steve and Chef Tom every day when classes used to be in session, so I don't see them as often anymore. I own a business called Raising the Bar. I have a partner, Tanisha Goodson, and we work out of the historic Broad Street Market in Midtown Harrisburg. One of our things at the market is we really like to take items that everyone eats traditionally with bakeries, scones, croissants, and even Irish soda bread, and we like to put our own little twist on it. So one of the things we did for the month of March is we do an Irish soda bread, which is normally traditionally caraway seeds and raisins, and we did ours with rosemary and cheddar cheese. So what we're going to start off with is 2 cups of flour. We have a half a teaspoon of baking soda, a full teaspoon of baking powder. We have our fresh rosemary. You can use dried rosemary, just use a little less in the recipe. Dried herbs are a little bit more pungent and strong. But also you can use a mixture of herbs, spices, anything you want, just to kind of have some fun if you have something fresh in your garden. Some kosher salt. And you're just going to mix your dry ingredients together. One of my favorite things about baking and the culinary field is all the fun stories that kind of come behind the traditions of food or why certain recipes were named for a reason. And so Irish soda bread, actually, soda breads began in America with Native Americans. They used the ash from wood that's been burned, and they used that as the first baking soda. Mixed a simple bread, put it on a stone, a hot stone, and baked it. It made its way back to Ireland. In Ireland, the temperatures and their climate isn't really good for hard wheats. Hard wheats are what we need because there's a higher protein to make our yeasted breads, which is really common in America and other countries. Over there, they have a spring wheat or a softer wheat. So that's more for pastries, items that don't really work well with yeast. So yeast also, a couple hundred years ago, was considered more expensive, a little bit more of a luxury item, commercial yeast. So they really got settled on using baking soda as their leavener. It was cheaper, it was more readily available. It was more of an item used out of, they got into soda breads not so much because they loved it so much, but pretty much more out of poverty. It was a staple in the household, it fed you, it kept you nourished, and it's hearty. So I've added all my dry ingredients. I'm gonna add my buttermilk and my egg. Gently mix. What's great about soda bread is it's something you can do with your kids, or you can do really quickly. By the time your oven preheats, your soda bread is ready to go. I'm gonna grab my cheese. So Chef Tom got me some Kerrygold, some Irish cheese. I get the Kerrygold and we use at home Dubliner. They're Dubliner. They're really great cheddar cheeses. They're really nice and yummy. Again, use any kind of cheese you'd like. But yummy cheddar for St. Patrick's Day is really good. Use about 3.5 to 4 ounces. If you want a little bit more cheese, go ahead and use a little bit more cheese. And with any time you're working with doughs, this is one where you don't want to over mix. Just till you come together. Now, baking soda, we use baking powder in this as well. It just acts as a secondary leavener. Now you use buttermilk because when you're using baking soda, you must have an acid present. So you can get acid from honey, from molasses, from buttermilk, from vinegar, from lemon juice. So the baking soda reacts with that and it creates some gas bubbles, some air bubbles, which is what you usually get when you're using commercial yeast in a yeasted bread. All I do after this, put it right on your sheet tray. You can press it down, you can shape it a little bit, but for the most part, it just goes right in the oven. You can store it across the top. And when it comes out, we're gonna brush it with butter. You can also use a Dutch oven if you have at home, or like a Le Creuset, a cast iron pan. You can do that as well. That'll help it rise even better in the oven. Come out of the oven, we have our little soda bread.
We had a quick question. Will this recipe be posted somewhere? Because it looks really good.
Yes, we can post the recipe, yes.
Awesome, thank you.
And a lot of times what you don't want to do with soda bread is make very large loaves. It is a heavier bread, like a biscuit. And you know, a little kind of goes a long way. Very often, like Chef Tom said earlier, you're gonna serve a small wedge with your corned beef and cabbage. We are later gonna make a little bit of a sandwich out of it. Often just spread with some yummy European butter or some jam, depending on your flavor. This isn't something we eat a lot in our house. It's a once a year St. Patrick's Day tradition. My sister made one this year that she actually typed in lighter and fluffier soda bread. And she actually brought over bread that was a soda bread, but it definitely had a lighter texture and it reminded me more of a traditional bread, which some of us liked, but some of us were used to we like the traditional. We like the corned beef and cabbage, and we like the really heavy soda bread.
We had another quick question. How long does it take to bake and at what temperature?
Sure, so you wanted a little bit of a higher temperature so you can have those air bubbles from the baking soda rise. So this one took about 30 minutes at 400 degrees. So again, depends a little bit on your oven. If your oven's on the hotter side, maybe knock it down to 375. But it's really, you can go by browning. Once you see a really nice brown coloring, you can even press it on the top a little bit. If you press it and it's starting to sink, your bread's not ready. Just the same as if you were making a biscuit. You'll see it rise that little bit and form a really nice crust.
All right.
Hand it over to Chef Steve.
Thank you, Chef Casey. So the next thing we're gonna make is a potato side dish called Cold Cannon. So what we're gonna do So I boiled about 3 pounds of potatoes this morning. I peeled them, put them in some salt water, and I just got done draining them. They were boiling about half hour, 45 minutes. You could quarter them if you have a little bit more time. I cut them a little smaller. So that's what's in this bowl here. We got just some boiled potatoes. One of the things we're going to do first, one of the things that's in Cold Cannon is kale. So the first part of my recipe, I got to blend up 8 ounces of kale with some green onion. When you do this, you just want to make sure it's like coarsely chopped. You don't want it real fine. Just pulse it. I'm using a food processor. You can also use a blender if you want. But a food processor is a little bit easier to work with. All right. I'm going to take this mixture and put it back in the bowl. And we're going to save this for a little bit later. All right, so this is my mixture right here. All it is some blended up kale and some green onion that we're going to save for like a few more minutes. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to mash our potatoes. So I got some butter here. And I'm going to hand mash them instead of using a mixing bowl. So all you're going to do is take I have a balloon whisk here. And you're just going to incorporate your butter right in with your potatoes. It's going to take a little bit of time, but it's not going to take too much time because you want to cook your potatoes so they're fork tender. Makes them nice and easy to mash. Starting to come together and put some more butter in. And some people use cream, but you don't need to in this situation because the butter acts as what brings your potatoes together for you. Because the natural heat from the potato is just melting the butter as you mix it. Now, when you make mashed potatoes, in general, you gotta make sure you don't over boil your potatoes because they become very starchy. All right. So I hand mashed our potatoes right here. Just gonna fold everything together. At this rate, I'm gonna add our kale and green onion mix. I'm not gonna add it all. Just gonna add a little bit of it and just gonna fold it right in. It gives that nice green, festive colors. You just fold it right on itself. And you're gonna add a little bit more green onions in. A 1/4 cup of finely chopped green onions. Fold that in as well. And then you're just gonna season with a little bit of salt and pepper. I'm using some kosher salt and some coarsely ground black pepper. You can use white pepper as well, whichever you prefer. Just gonna fold it back on itself and incorporate all of those seasonings. Yep. All right. And I'm all done with this dish temporarily, so I'm gonna pass it back off to Chef Casey.
Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
All right. So one of the things I miss about working in restaurants and just being in a bakery is that I have sweet all day. So when I used to work in a restaurant or a hotel, you might come up with an Irish soda bread and you had a little break, but nice people you worked with, like Steve, and I used to work at Brico together, might have corned beef laying around or something else for you to kind of play with. I don't have that. So this is actually really exciting. So Chef Tom has given us some of his corned beef. I'm gonna grab the soda bread. I'm just gonna slice a little up. And then keep it really simple. So we're just gonna use some Swiss cheese. And I made what I like to call a quick sauce. I just take some stone ground mustard and we put, stone ground mustard. And then we just took a little bit of heavy cream and mixed it together. Take that. Spread it all the way on there. You can make it a little looser, like more like a sauce if you prefer. Sometimes I like to put a little horseradish in it or even a horseradish mustard. This is how I prefer to layer it. This corned beef looks absolutely amazing. So I'm going to keep this all open faced. You of course can slice it again, put another slice right on top. You can of course throw this under your broiler or salamander and melt everything together. And I just took some kale with a little bit of oil, salt and pepper. And I just massaged it. So it's not even cooked, but if you massage it and just move it around and let it sit for a little bit, you get just a really nice texture instead of getting that crispiness that often happens when you cook the kale instead. And if we pair it with some amazing cold cannon, which is my favorite way to have mashed potatoes, you definitely have a super hearty lunch or dinner.
You're welcome.
Chef Casey, we had a question. Can you use something in place of kale?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, you could skip the green, but the green to me adds great color, definitely adds another texture in there. I love sauteed spinach. You can even just use some of the cabbage that's also made and use all your leftovers on there instead of making something additional. So it's a great way to just use all your leftovers and make an amazing little sandwich. And any cheese, anything you want.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Chef Tom?
Wow, that looks awesome. That really looks good. The IT guys here are going crazy right now. So real quick, just give me a minute to get set up. So one of the things that happens after St. Patrick's Day is if you don't eat all your corned beef and cabbage, and sometimes it doesn't reheat real well, everybody says, what do I do with this stuff now? I have this corned beef and I have this cabbage and I have this potatoes left over. Well, this is kind of a trick that we do in the restaurant business, and we've actually done it here, is we make what's called a Reuben chowder. So if you saw the boiled corned beef that I showed you earlier, all right, I saved all the stock and I strained it to make sure I got anything out of there that I didn't want in there. And I started to cook some diced cabbage in with that. And right now I'm just going to melt some butter and I'm going to make a little bit of a roux. And this is going to actually come together very quickly, but everybody knows what a Reuben is, right? A Reuben sandwich is usually rye bread, Thousand Island dressing, Swiss cheese, corned beef, and sauerkraut. So we're going to make a take on that. So once we get our butter melted, we'll add our flour, we'll make our roux. Now what I did was I took the boiled brisket, the point, and I just diced it up. And you see it's actually very tender. It's going to be great for soup. And then I took some of the potatoes that I had in the braising pan and for when I did the baked flat, and I'm going to use those up. You know, a lot of the household budget is making sure you utilize healthy leftovers, not old food, but healthy leftovers. So we want to make sure that and it's best anytime you're going to do something like this, don't wait until the food's 5 or 7 days old and say, now what am I going to do with it? Make a decision. You're not going to eat it in the next day or two. Do something else with it and preserve it. So also what I did is I took some rye bread. I like seeded rye that has the caraway seed in it. I just think it gives it a great flavor. So I made some croutons. So that's going to be for part of our soup. My butter's almost melted. And for those of you who have not attended one of our classes before, roux is equal parts a fat, could be butter, could be oil, could be chicken fat, and flour. And you want to make sure you melt it. You don't want to brown it unless you're making Cajun food. So it's melted. Going to mix in my flour. And I like a kind of a loose roux. Sometimes I don't like a real pasty roux because I think a real pasty roux takes longer to cook out the flour flavor. You should be able to see that. All right, that's kind of a loose roux. It's not real stiff. Now, because I had my stock back here boiling with the cabbage in it, this is actually going to come together very quickly. I'm just going to put some of it in to stir it. And because it's already hot, it's not going to take long to thicken up. But I'm utilizing my broth that I had left over from my boiled brisket part. Okay, that's thickening up nicely. And now I'm going to add the rest. And in there I had my cabbage already that I had cooked off. So I have my cabbage flavor in my broth.
Tom, how long do you boil the cabbage?
So because it was cut small, it only boiled for about 10 minutes. And it's going to simmer in here. So it's going to get tender, more tender as it, really what I wanted to do was extract the flavor. I was doing that while Chef Casey and Chef Steve were doing their presentation. So you see it didn't take that long. So as soon as this comes up to a boil, we're going to have the start of our Reuben chowder. Now I took the potatoes that I had in the braising pan and I just diced them up a little smaller because soup, you don't want big ingredients in. It's got to fit on a soup spoon. A good way to measure soup is if some or all of the ingredients can actually fit on a spoon so you taste all the flavors that are in it.
How much cabbage should you use? Like how much cabbage
So
is
for that, I used 1/4 head. So I'm going to say probably 12 ounces, not much more than that. So I'm just going to get that up to a boil and then we're not far away from being ready. So magic ingredient, Swiss cheese. You got to have a Swiss cheese flavor in your soup or it's not Reuben chowder. And I like to add a little bit of, instead of heavy cream, I like to add a little bit of sour cream. Heavy cream doesn't have a whole lot of flavor. It's mostly butterfat. But sour cream has a little bit of tang to it. And because I don't have sauerkraut, I want a little bit of tang. So we're just going to bring that up to a boil. It's almost ready. And then once we do, this is going to come together really quick. This was always a hit at any place I ever worked where we ever offered it, and it was unusual. And the unfortunate thing was, it only happened around St. Patrick's Day or a couple days after, because that was when you were doing briskets and you had the broth. It's really the best way to do it. All right, we're cooking. I'm going to melt my cheese in here. So I get that Swiss cheese flavor. I had to make a little extra because the IT guys are kind of eyeing this up. So everybody loves Reuben. That's I don't know. What's your favorite sandwich, guys? Reuben, it's my favorite sandwich. It absolutely is. I mean, it probably should be cheesesteaks because I'm a Philly sports fan, but I just always have loved a good Reuben. All right, and we're going to put a little bit of sour cream in here, and this just kind of gives it just that little bit of tang. When I make potato soup, I always put sour cream in it. I know a lot of restaurants garnish it, but I was putting sour cream in my potato soup 30 years ago, before they were making baked potato soup, because I felt it offered a better flavor. So I'm just going to mix that so it adds a little bit of creaminess to it. So in goes my corned beef. Now, when I cut this up, I kind of made sure I tried to pull some of the little bit of fat on there because I didn't want the fatty pieces. Because brisket has fat, it just does. And I'm going to float my potatoes in. So what makes it a chowder is potatoes. So anytime it says chowder on the menu, there should be potatoes in it. All right, we're just going to bring that up to a boil. Well, that looks good. Now, if you wanted to, you could garnish this with a little bit of green onions or chopped parsley just to make it a little more festive. But the key to the flavor also is the croutons, because you want to have the rye bread croutons on there. And that's the thing about croutons. Everybody thinks it's just Italian bread, or it can be any kind of bread, really. Any kind of artisan bread makes a better crouton than store-bought because it's a little more holy and a little more structure to it. Where store-bought is that smooth stuff and it kind of tastes like toast, not so much a crouton.
So Chef Tom, I know you said that you made extra for the IT guys, so how about for you, the audience?
For what?
The audience.
Audience. Well, if you can get on campus, I'll give you some. Just come up to the back of Cooper and
All right, sounds good.
share. I know. It's hard to email this, you know. I was just reading today about ghost kitchens. Do you know what ghost kitchens are? Okay, so I belong to an ACF Chefs chapter, and we send out a membership survey about things you'd like to learn more about. And one of the things that somebody put on there was ghost kitchens. Do you know what a ghost kitchen is? Chris on IT says he knows what it is. So a ghost kitchen is a kitchen that's set up maybe from a restaurant that doesn't have seating in. And it's basically set up to do delivery and takeout. And it was like, I thought, wow, what an idea. Because, you know, the pandemic created a lot of things. And some things may never go back to what they were. So you may see less restaurants out there that have seating. Because they figured they could make their food and people paid the price for it, whether they sat in their restaurant or not. So, but ghost kitchens are ones that are set up, less overhead, smaller place. So, all right, that looks good. So we're going to dish some of this up.
Chef Tom, we have 2 questions. So the first
Sure.
one is, what is the total cook time for this from start to finish?
For the soup,
Yes.
probably I'm going to say 45 minutes
Awesome.
because I had a hot stock. If I didn't have a hot stock, it would be different. But I'm going to say 45 minutes. And if you actually save all your ingredients from your St. Patrick's Day meal and start from scratch, it's probably about an hour because you got to get everything up to temp. But because you know your corned beef will be cold, your potatoes will be cold. Everything was kind of warm today, so it just made it a little easier. Now, if you wanted to, you could serve some extra Swiss cheese on top, some grated Swiss, just to make the whole 9 experience. I wouldn't do the Thousand Island thing. I don't think you need it at that point, but it's a great soup. It's very different and very works for all the things that we did today. And I think actually Chef Casey's soda bread would make a great crouton for on top of this. I do. So if you wanted to do that, you could put caraway in your soup if you still want the caraway flavor. So.
Awesome. And our next question was, what is the difference between a soup and a stew?
So mostly a stew is larger cut product. All right, a stew is a form of stovetop braising. So what we did today when we made the brisket or the flat brisket, we did an oven braise. So we put our liquid in there, we put our veggies in there, we put and we covered it, has to be covered, and then we let it cook for 2 or 3 hours. A stew is something that's done on top of the stove. So you basically start off same thing. You start off with your ingredients, but it's smaller size pieces of the meat and the vegetables. It's not large pieces. And it has to simmer to break down. And usually stew beef is usually cuts of meat that are not that great. All right. So you have to simmer them. You have to braise them to make them tender. So, and then soup should have bite-sized ingredients. In other words, something that, like I said, if I took a soup spoon and through there, I should be able to get some of the potato, some of the corned beef. I should be able to taste the whole experience on one spoon. Whereas, stew can be eaten with a fork, really. So that's a great question, though. Any other questions?
All right, yeah, if anyone has any other questions, just feel free to stick them in the chat. That all looks so good.
And we'll have recipes out in a couple days. So if you're interested in the recipes, I don't know if I'll have them to you in time for St. Patrick's Day, but we might. So one of the things that I looked at when we were talking about doing this segment was pouring my own beef ahead of time. It is a week-long process. You would take like your pickling spice, and your tender quick, bring it to a boil, make a brine, put it over whatever cut that you're going to use, and put it in like a Ziploc bag. And it takes at least 7 days. It might take even longer. And it depends on how thick your cut is. But it was something I wanted to do. I just couldn't find the tender quick until Sunday. So it was a moot point. But it's something challenging. You know, the internet has all kinds of information out there where you can go out. It's probably a little late to start for St. Patrick's Day, but you don't have to just do it for St. Patrick's Day. So.
Awesome, thank you. It doesn't look like we have any other questions, but there is a comment saying thank you for the great recipes.
Oh, you're welcome. And I want to say thank you to Chef Steve and Chef Casey Callahan. She's a class act for coming on our show. It was an honor to have you.
Thank you.
So, all right, thank you, everybody. We'll see you in April.
All right, well, thank you so much, Chef Tom, Chef Steve, and Chef Casey. And if you all will just check the chat in there, I put an email sign-up form, an event evaluation form, and just a way to learn more about Hack Events with our Hack Events calendar. So make sure to copy those and check that out. And thank you again so much for putting on such a great cooking show, and look for one in the future. So thank you, everyone.
Our pleasure.
And then Chef Callahan, if you will just drop in the chat for us, or just tell us so we can drop in the chat exactly where you are located at the market, the address, because people would like to come and support when they can. And I can actually just maybe Google it real quick and put it in the chat so that people can come and support you. Thank you for being a part. We appreciate your expertise and your skills. And it just worked out perfectly. I heard Chef Tom say in the beginning that you are actually married to someone from Ireland. So how convenient that it worked out so well, right? That we would bring you for this episode. Didn't have any idea that you was married to someone from Ireland, but it just worked out so well. So I'm sure this was right up your alley. So thank you for adding value. Chef Tom and Chef Steve do a phenomenal job, but it was so good to have you here. So we say thank you. And then I will certainly look for the address so that people can have it to support you in your personal endeavors. Thank you again for being here.
My husband is not from Ireland, but his whole family is. And he looks like he's from Ireland, but no, yes, his whole family is Irish. As far as we know, there is nothing else mixed in there. My family is Irish and Polish. So I'm a Burke and I married a Callahan. And yes, you looking at him, you don't think he's anything but. But the Broad Street Market is located at 1233 North 3rd Street. We're across from the Midtown Scholar Bookstore, so it makes it a nice little destination in Harrisburg. There are 2 buildings. The one building has butcher shops, produce vendors. In our building, it's more of like a food hall. So you can go in there and get a bunch of different foods. There's Puerto Rican, there's Jamaican, there's Korean, there's Greek. And then our bakery's in there. We're right at the 3rd Street entrance as soon as you go in. I will say, during this whole pandemic, we're very lucky. People have really supported us locally, and this is just another way of supporting a small business. You know, a lot of people say, you know, it's not always about spending money. Sometimes it's just putting on your social media that you had a great scone, or that you dropped by there and you had a coffee and a croissant, and that makes all the difference for small businesses. So it's really been great, and everyone's been really supportive, just as Hack has been, Chef Tom and Chef Steve. So thank you very much.
All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, if we don't have any other questions, we will be back here next month. So stay tuned, keep your eye out. We love this show. We love this episode. We've learned a lot. Some of us has gained a few pounds from trying the recipes. So just a little caution there. But thank you for joining us. We'll see you guys next month in April. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.